another question, Tim, and it's not on your list. So
Sure, go for it.
we have someone asking about lead-based paint. How do you know if you have lead-based paint in your home? Do you do those inspections? And if not, like, what's the process?
So yeah, lead-based paint is really easy to test for. And keep in mind the date to remember on most of these contaminants in home is around the 70s. So around the 70s, the EPA said you're no longer allowed to use lead-based paint in a house. So if you're selling a home and if there's any concern about it, what we do as an inspection company is we're not going to be alarmist on any of these things because a lot of homes have these things in them. So if it's built in the 70s and there's a mom or dad that wants us to test, what we normally do is we'll go into a closet somewhere where it's not obvious and it's required that we take a 1-inch square of paint, like a paint chip, if you will. We put it in a Ziploc bag and we send it to a laboratory to have it analyzed. It's got to be a state certification, a state certified lab that does it. You can find it. As far as what realtors need to know, in my opinion, is if we inspect a home, depending on when it was built, we're going to look for the wall coverings regardless. So we're going to make sure everything is static, everything's secure, nothing's peeling. The concern with lead-based paint is really for children. And it really kind of hit at the forefront of our attention in Flint, Michigan, just like the water thing. In the area of Flint, Detroit, a lot of older homes, they had people living in them with peeling paint, and children would grab it and they'd ingest it. And oh, by the way, the kids have elevated blood count of lead, and that's where it came from for the most part. So if I tell people all this time, and this can kind of go into the asbestos discussion too when we go there, but if you're buying a home, regardless of the age, and there's good wall coverings, nothing's peeling, coming off the walls, I'm not going to be overly concerned about it. And what I normally do is to try to talk people down from a concern. I tell them what we normally do at our company, we would like to see the home first. You come there to your home inspection, we will evaluate it at the same time. If we do see a lot of loose paint, then you might want to have it tested. If not, it's probably fine.
And Tim, I've been told, I don't remember who told me this a long time ago, but they said if you're buying a home that was built prior to 1978, you're going to find lead-based paint in it.
There's just a good chance. I wouldn't say a catch-all phrase, you're going to find it every time. I've done many older homes where we couldn't find any. And they break it down by parts per million, so they're pretty darn exact about it. But it's really hit and miss. And a lot of times it just depends on how you took the sample, where's the sample. The problem with painting throughout an older home is there might be a really high concentration in one area and it can be completely void in another. So what you want to do if someone wants a lead-based paint test, you want to first consult with your client, find out what areas of this home are you going to redo? What areas are you going to pull the drywall or the plaster down? Those are the areas you want to test because you can't test the entire house.
Right. Interesting. And how long, if you do a lead-based paint test, how long does that take to usually come back?
Oh, just 3 to 4 business days.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about radon tests and you kind of mentioned water tests previously, can you talk to us about a water test? Again, how long that takes to get, and then what exactly, when we get a water test, what are we having tested? Like, what are we looking for?
So we take the lead of the local health departments in Michigan, and most of the local health departments recommend you test for 2 components, and that is the nitrate level and the total bacteria. You guys may have heard about it referred to as coliform. That's just a type of bacteria. So we just call it a total bacteria and a nitrate test. And the reason those 2 are important because those are things you can't smell or taste, and they can affect your health. So that's the most common test that we do. Now, because we've had so many people come from out of state into our area recently over the last 4 or 5 years, they've asked for some additional testing. And sometimes they'll want lead testing done on the water. Sometimes they want arsenic testing done. So we can do those kind of things as well. The normal water test usually takes us 3 to 4 business days. And if you want it rushed, we could always even get it quicker than that. In this market, everything has got to be fast. You guys know that. I took 10 calls this morning, and every realtor, I smile when I answer the phone because they all sounded exactly the same. And they said this, they said, Tim, I'm writing an offer. It's a multiple offer situation. How quickly can you get us on the inspection schedule? And my canned answer is in 2 to 3 business days, and you'll get the report within the hour. And that's what they want to hear. And that's what we do. So we get our reports out within the hour for the home.
That's awesome. So if I was writing an offer, a multiple offer situation, and I really knew I needed a water test, maybe, my clients had concern, I might call you and find that information out. And maybe I would write an inspection period that was very short. But I might do an additional contingency in the additional conditions box that's just as contingent upon purchaser satisfaction and approval of water test, so that water test can stand alone, or a radon or whatever else, if you had something separate you wanted there.
Yep. So the water test, again, I would just put a rush on it in that case, Megan, to get it done just in 2 days and instead of 3 or 4.
Okay.
Most laboratories will do that, no problem. They'll charge a little extra to do it, but that's okay. And then keep in mind the radon testing we do is we only use continuous monitors. That's an important topic too, because there are a number of ways to test for radon. One is a passive device. Those are the ones you get at the hardware store. They're nothing more than a cardboard envelope with charcoal inside. We used those 15, 20 years ago, and we got away from them because what they do is they use a national algorithm, and in my opinion, they're not as effective, they're not as accurate. So we use these devices. You guys may have seen them in homes. They're called continuous radon monitors. They're EPA approved for a 48-hour test. The nice thing about them is they're tamper-proof. So if anyone ever comes into a home, they open up windows, they try to falsify their result, we're going to know about it because it's going to tell us that barometric pressure, wind speed, airflow is all calibrated in our monitors. And then the other thing is these monitors, they give you a graph. And this is an important thing for realtors to know. Radon is never constant. It's doing one of these peaks and valleys throughout a diurnal or daily period. That's normal. That's what you should have. But what you do is you take the average of that graph, and that's what the EPA says your radon level is in your home.
Interesting. So Tim, one of the things I guess once in a while, I remember back in the day, like I needed a water test and I would run out and take the water sample myself.
Mhm.
It's pretty finicky. I mean, you can't just, you have to be pretty precise about how you're doing it. What are your thoughts on should an agent be doing it or should you really want to get it hired out or what?
Well, years ago, I know a lot of my realtor colleagues were doing that. And now, if anyone finds out about it, they can really kind of raise a problem because most of the mortgage companies pretty much state to our clients that you can't have your realtor or you can't do it. You have to have a third party professional home inspection do that. And that just happened twice last week where my client said, I can do the water test cheaper than the home inspection company. And their mortgage officer said, no, you have to let the home inspector do it. The most common thing you can do, Megan, when you do a water test is contaminate it for bacteria. The bacteria on your hands can get in the water really easy. It doesn't take much to contaminate a water sample. And there are certain protocols you need to follow. And just so you guys know, when a water test is taken, it should come from the kitchen tap because that's where the majority of drinking water is coming from. So the first thing you do is you go to the kitchen tap, you take off the aerator, that's a little screen, and that's important because that screen holds bacteria and minerals. So you always want to remove that screen. And then what you do is you run the water for 5 to 15 minutes and just let it go. And then you come back and then you have a nitrate and a bacteria bottle and you have to chlorinate your hands. You chlorinate the tap where the aerator came out so it's clean of any bacteria. And then you take the draw and you cap it right away. And then you have 12 hours to take it to the laboratory. If it's warm out in the wintertime, it should be on ice. And then you take it into the laboratory. So it sounds minor, but I, over the years, just for fun, I've done my own tests where I didn't clean my hands in my own house. And I wanted to see how accurate these tests were. And I could contaminate the water very easily in my own house with bacteria. So just know there's right ways and wrong ways of doing water tests.
That's pretty funny because it shows how long it's been since I've been selling real estate when I'm still thinking we do our own water test. So let's talk about that a little bit more because I've had situations where a water test does come back and we've actually requested for one reason or another water test or done another water test because if you're a seller and you find out there's bacteria in your well, your buyer probably wants that well not to have bacteria in it prior to closing. So Tim, can you talk about what happens if we do find bacteria in the well?
Sure. And I was just on the phone with a lab technician before the Zoom call this morning. Keep in mind, when you find something in your water, whether it be bacteria or some other contaminant, 9 times out of 10, it is not coming from the aquifer in the ground. We're kind of blessed in northern Michigan. We have really high quality water, better than most other parts of the country. So when we find bacteria in the water, it's hardly ever coming from the ground. It's coming from the piping inside that home, okay? Now, around the 70s, 80s, even up to the 90s, they use a lot of solder with lead in it. So we can go into a home and find trace amounts of lead in the water. It's not coming from the aquifer, and the bacteria almost never comes from the aquifer. It's always coming from the lead pipes or the pipes within that home, the solder joints. So the main thing to know, let's say we did a water test for a client and it came back with positive bacteria. So I tell my clients, again, we're not going to scare anybody at my company. We say, you know what, this is something that's easy to fix. And all you do is you chlorinate your well system, you flush out the lines in your home. 9 times out of 10, it becomes a non-issue. But that's really an important topic because I have people, there is a lot of concerns about people moving from other parts of the country to here where their water is not good, and they're very concerned about water quality. It's really one of my inspectors has a real strong background in water quality, and he's very knowledgeable about it. But it's very, very rare to buy a home where there's a water problem that cannot be fixed.
Awesome, thank you. What else, Tim? What other? I had another question on something else.
Actually have a question since we're talking about services, and it's more so a comment than a question. But Tim, you're a one-stop shop for pretty much everything. So for any of us that are doing single wides or double wides on an FHA loan, you offer structural engineer reports. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Sure. So anytime.